Viltrox have recently released a brand new 13mm f1.4 prime lens for Sony E-mount cameras. But is this wide-angle APS-C lens worthy of all the hype? Well, today we're going to find out.
I'm really fucking with all of your energy. Highly pursued, but I don't let it get to me. They say the start of us might be the end of me. I don't read minds, but I see signs. Johnny and June, and we walking the line. Remember, you best with a streak of some bomb for the spring. I got hella respect for you doing your thing. Baby, if you love me, let it show up. Let it show up. Let it show up.
In full frame terms, this 13mm lens equates roughly to a 19.5mm focal length. This makes it the perfect option for anyone looking to take photos of landscapes, architecture, or even photos of your mum. However, unlike your mum, this thing is totally manageable in terms of size and weight, and feels very nicely balanced on the front of my Sony a6600. It's incredibly well built too, being made almost entirely from metal, though it doesn't include any kind of internal dust or weatherproofing. On the lens body, there's a large focus ring, as well as a manual aperture ring, which has been declicked. Though one issue I do find with most Viltrox lenses that I've tested in the past is that these aperture rings don't have enough resistance between auto mode, marked as an A, and the smallest aperture value, in this case f16. This means that it's just way too easy to accidentally knock it from auto to f16, which is really annoying if you're anything like me and prefer to just have this dial permanently set to auto mode. As for price, it's currently available for $429, which in my opinion is incredibly good value for money considering the high build quality. Also, as a side note, Viltrox have kindly given me a 10% discount coupon that you guys can use on anything within their web store, and you can find more details about this in the video description below. When it comes to autofocus, in good lighting conditions, this lens is quick and accurate even when shooting wide open at f1.4. In low light conditions, although the AF speed slows ever so slightly, it is still nice and accurate with no signs of hunting. When shooting wide open in high speed continuous mode, the vast majority of the photos taken were sharp and in focus, with only a few that were very marginally out of focus, mainly as George drew closer to the camera. Switching over to video mode for a moment, when shooting a moving target walking towards the camera at a regular pace, this lens did an okay job of keeping up with George. It did seem to lose him ever so slightly during the middle of the walk, but for the rest of it, it was absolutely fine. When repeating this test at a faster pace, strangely, it did a much better job this time and managed to keep locked onto George throughout the entire clip. As for AF noise, this thing is pretty quiet, though our camera's built-in microphone did manage to pick up a tiny bit of grinding noise from the AF motor. When shooting in manual focus, this thing is an absolute dream to use. It has a nice smooth action and a decent amount of resistance and a totally usable throw, so yeah, no complaints here. There's very little focus breathing with this thing either, which is further good news for videographers. Now moving on to our bokeh balls test, and unfortunately the results weren't ideal. Although the orbs are nice and round in the centre, they very quickly become misshapen towards the edges of the frame. The balls of light are also very textured too, which is sure to upset any bokeh fanatics. In terms of general bokeh quality though, shooting at f1.4 gives your images a nice thick background blur, and although it's certainly not the smoothest bokeh I've ever seen, I definitely wouldn't be disappointed with these results. So flaring is a thing with this lens. There's lots of ghosting and artifacting present. Though personally I actually really like the results it gives. I think the artifacting in particular looks really cinematic. Though if you're not a fan of this type of thing, then good news, because there's a lens hood included in the box which should help shade the front element in harsh lighting conditions. On a longitudinal chromatic aberration test, the results are fairly colourful, with blue fringing at the top of the chart and amber fringing below the area of sharp focus. That said, the real life images taken with this lens are just superb. All of these images were shot at f1.4 and they're all super sharp and feature bags of contrast. The AF on this lens was bang on every time, which meant I was absolutely spoiled for choice when it came to editing them afterwards in Lightroom. The only real criticism I have with this lens is that it suffers quite badly with vignetting at the corners of the frame. Though luckily this could be very easily removed in Lightroom using the lens correction sliders. Now normally I don't shoot portraits with super wide angle lenses, as I'm not personally a huge fan of the distortion it creates. However, when shooting in an urban environment like this, the wider focal length really lends itself to the situation, and I was super happy with the results I came away with. As always, it's really hard to appreciate the sharpness of a lens using real life examples, but when we look at the test chart image, we can see that when shooting wide open at f1.4, this lens is nice and sharp with a good amount of contrast despite a small touch of amber fringing. The corners of the frame are noticeably darker due to that heavy vignetting problem, and although the results are softer than the centre, it's still not a bad result, again despite some coloured fringing. Now this lens can shoot pretty close up too, and at this distance the results are again nice and sharp with plenty of contrast. So after seeing all the test results, what is my conclusion on this lens? Well, to be quite honest with you, I think this is probably one of the best lenses Viltrox has made to date. It's certainly not perfect, but for the price, it's an exceptionally well built lens that offers nice crisp images even when shooting wide open. And remember, if you are looking to pick up this lens, don't forget to use the 10% discount voucher for the Viltrox store in the description below. You're welcome.